Hi, it's me, Jody Hand, Mrs. Hand Painted, and today's video is one of a series of 8 paintings that you can do, some mini landscapes. I'm going to show you how to do each one of these in one of the 8 videos that I'm sharing with you. All of the videos are separate, so this video will only show one of the paintings. I'm going to be doing painting number 4. You can do this on one 9x12 sheet of paper. I have this set up to do 8 different paintings that are all 2.5 inches by 3.75 inches. So you can also do them on these small little pads from Legion Paper Stonehenge. You can get these from lots of different retailers, but I purchased mine from Jerry's Artorama, and they have them in their buy it, try it deals if they're in stock. I'll put a link for that in my description as well so that you can look those up. But these are the exact size of all of the rectangles on my paper, and you can fit 8 on one 9x12 sheet of paper. Make sure you check out the other 7 videos so that you can do all 8 landscapes on your paper.
Supplies I'll be using in this video and all of the mini landscape series is a Legion Stonehenge cold press paper block size 9x12, Daniel Smith watercolors, Princeton Velvetouch brushes, mainly some rounds, and a 1/4 inch dagger striper brush. If you want to see my complete list that I have in my palette, I do have a link in the description so that you can see which colors I do have. Sometimes I do use a few that were left over on my palette from a previous painting. Begin this by just wetting our paper with clean water. Just cover the entire rectangle with clean water. I'm using my round 10. And then I'm going to add my color into that wet paper. I'm going to start out with a little bit of blue. I think I'll use some, this is cobalt blue. Really just any bright blue you wanted to use, you could put in for the sky. And then I'm going to have that go into more of a gray. I had some ultramarine and burnt sienna mix already on my palette, so I'm using that just to blend into that blue a little bit to make it a little more gray. Then I'm taking some undersea green and I'm just making kind of a sloped area, and then I'll add in um, a little bit of a bumpy area at the top just to give the illusion of some distant trees along that ridge. This will be like a hill in the background. Just blending that down with a very diluted mix of a little bit of undersea green. And then I'll add in a brighter green coming the other direction. This will be what is on the left side of the path I'm going to put in. I'm using hooker's green for this. And this is just very loosely putting in for my background. And then I'm going to go ahead and dry this so that I can do my next layers over top. Right now I'm going to switch to a smaller round brush. I'm using a size 4. And I'm just going to get in, this is some transparent brown oxide. I'm going to draw in just kind of a not quite straight path, just coming down that hill. I'm going to start very narrow at the top, which is farther back, and then I'll get wider as I come down at an angle. And now I'm going to add in some distant bushes, foliage, trees, just using some sap green. Really just use any mixtures of green that you want. I'm using a little bit brighter of a green, and I'm just dabbing my brush to give the illusion of foliage in the background. Since this is so small, we don't have to be very precise or detailed. It's just a little fuzzy image, the idea of this landscape. So I'm just doing some little splotches of color down on the paper. And I'm going to turn those into some trees. So going back into my brown and just adding some very thin little branches, just coming up from the side of the road. And then as you get further down, you can make your trunks of your trees a little bit wider. But the further away they are, the thinner they need to be. So if you want to use a smaller round brush for that, you certainly can. I'm just going very lightly with the tip of my round 4. And then, like I said, I'm making that one that's further or closer to you, that's going to be a little bit a wider of a trunk. So I'm just painting that trunk in and giving it some branches, just very randomly. And then I'll go back over the top of that with some different shades of green to give that the foliage. Really just mix any combinations of green you have just to give it some dimension, and so you're not using all one color, and make sure you're leaving some areas blank or where you can still see the background through, just to give an illusion of light. And I'm just dabbing my brush in the paint and then dabbing it on the paper. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a darker green and just go around the base of my bushes along the edge of that road to represent some bushes or some smaller trees that might be down there, and some coming into the grass on this other side. And just varying up the color of green. I'm using a little mixing in other greens or some yellow, blue. Put some darker green back here. And then I'm going to add a different type of tree on the left-hand side. I'm going to add some more like evergreen type trees. So I'm switching to my 1/4" dagger brush. And just like we did, if you followed along with some of my other videos in mini landscape number 2, we did these evergreen trees. And I'm using my undersea green. And I'm going to do the same method I did with my dagger striper, which is I make the trunk with a very thin line and then turning my brush to the side, using the side of that dagger striper to make dashes and lines, dabbing that and pressing at different pressures to make thicker or thinner lines. So this is something you could practice on a separate sheet if you're not comfortable with a dagger striper, or you could just use a round brush for making these, just use a smaller round. I'm just going to add a few of these coming off the foreground of the painting. And at this point, if you just want to check and see if there's any other areas that you might want to add a little more green, I'm just adding a little bit more along the edge of my path here. Just kind of blurring that and adding a little more texture and dimension over top of my trees. So just taking a couple other shades of green, and after that had dried a little bit, and just adding in some other colors to give it a little more dimension. And that is it for this one. You can add any more that you feel. I'm just adding a little bit more of a line to my road just to make it go back a tiny bit more into the bushes, but that is it for this one. And I have 7 other mini landscape tutorials in this series. If you want to check them out, you can subscribe to my channel. I also have a whole playlist just with these mini landscapes in it. And please follow me on Instagram if you want to see my paintings. I'm Mrs. Hand Painted.